Look at me for a moment. Not your phone, not the noise, not the world pulling at you. Because the truth is, your dreams are not dying from lack of talent. They're dying from distraction. Stay with me until the end. The final lessons will truly change how you see your life. Distraction is not harmless. It's expensive. And I want you to really feel the weight of that word expensive, because it doesn't charge you money first, it charges you time. And then quietly, almost politely, it charges you your dreams. We often treat distraction like a small habit, something casual, something everyone does. A notification here, a scroll there, a conversation that goes nowhere, a promise we make to ourselves and break without guilt. But imagine if every distraction were a tiny hole in your pocket, and every day you walk through life leaking minutes, hours, days, years without noticing, until one day you reach inside and realize what you were saving for is gone. That's how dreams disappear. Not in dramatic failures, not in loud defeats, but in slow leaks. I've watched it happen in people I love, and if I'm being honest, I've watched it happen in myself. There was a time when my calendar was full, but my soul felt empty, when I was busy all day yet deeply unfulfilled at night, because being busy is not the same as being aligned. Distraction is seductive because it feels productive, it feels safe, it feels like movement, but it's often just motion without direction. Like running on a treadmill and convincing yourself you're traveling the world. And the cost is subtle at first. You don't notice it on day one. You notice it years later when you look at someone living the life you once imagined and you wonder, why not me? Not because you weren't capable, not because you weren't talented, but because your attention, your most sacred resource, was divided, diluted, donated to things that never deserved it. Think about this for a moment. Every great creation in history required deep focus. Every meaningful relationship requires presence. Every spiritual awakening begins with awareness. And yet we live in a world that trains us to fragment ourselves, to split our attention into 1,000 pieces and call it normal. We wake up and reach for our phones before we reach for ourselves. We give the freshest part of our mind to noise, and then wonder why our own dreams feel tired. Distraction doesn't announce itself as danger. It arrives dressed as comfort. It says, rest a little longer, start tomorrow, you deserve a break. And sometimes that's true. Rest is sacred. But distraction masquerades as rest while slowly eroding discipline. And discipline is the bridge between intention and reality. I want you to imagine your life as a garden. Your dreams are seeds. Focus is water. Distraction is drought disguised as rain. It feels like something is happening but nothing is growing. You keep watering weeds and wondering why the flowers never bloom. And here's the spiritual truth we rarely talk about. Where your attention goes, your energy flows, and where your energy flows, your life grows. This is not poetry, this is law. If you give your attention to fear, fear grows. If you give it to comparison, insecurity grows. If you give it to purpose, purpose expands. Distraction is expensive because it robs you of intention, and intention is how the universe understands what you're asking for. I've met people who pray for clarity while living in constant distraction, and then they wonder why the answers never arrive. Silence is expensive too, but in a different way. Silence costs comfort. Distraction costs destiny. And here's the part that might sting a little, but stay with me, because the lessons ahead go even deeper. And if you leave now, you'll miss the shift that could change everything. Most of us don't lose focus all at once. We lose it in negotiations with ourselves. just this once, just 5 minutes. I'll get serious after this phase. And those negotiations feel harmless because they're small. But life is built from small decisions repeated daily. You don't wake up one day without a dream. You wake up one day realizing you stopped choosing it. Distraction trains you to live reactively instead of intentionally. It keeps you responding to life instead of creating it. And the tragedy is not that distractions exist. The tragedy is that we underestimate their power. A river doesn't carve a canyon in a day. It does it patiently, consistently, over time. That's how distraction works. It carves away at your courage, your consistency, your belief, until one day you don't even recognize the version of yourself who once wanted more. But here's the hope, and I need you to hear this clearly. Awareness is the beginning of freedom. The moment you realize distraction is costing you something precious, you reclaim your power. This isn't about becoming rigid or joyless or hyper-disciplined. It's about becoming conscious, about asking yourself, before you give your attention away, is this aligned with the life I'm trying to build? Because attention is prayer. Attention is devotion. Attention is how you say this matters. And when you start treating your attention as sacred, your life begins to reorganize itself around what truly matters. The world will still pull at you. The noise won't disappear, but you will change how you respond to it. And this is just the first step. If this reflection is stirring something inside you, a quiet discomfort, a recognition, a truth you've been avoiding, please don't stop here. The next lessons go deeper into why distraction holds such power over us, and how reclaiming your focus can heal parts of you you didn't even realize were hurting. Stay until the end, because what comes next isn't just about productivity or success. It's about coming back to yourself. And I promise you, missing that would be far more expensive than you realize. We don't distract ourselves because we are lazy or undisciplined. We distract ourselves because distraction feels safer than facing what's asking to be healed, and that truth deserves your full attention for a moment. Think about it. Whenever life asks you to sit still, to be quiet, to look inward, something inside tightens. Silence can feel confrontational. Stillness can feel like standing in front of a mirror, without makeup, without filters, without excuses. And so we reach for noise. We reach for our phones, for endless conversations, for tasks that look important but mean very little. Distraction becomes a soft escape hatch from emotions we don't know how to hold. Fear of failure, fear of success, grief we never processed, dreams we're scared to name out loud because naming them would mean taking responsibility for them. I've learned that most people aren't afraid of hard work. They're afraid of what they might discover about themselves when the noise finally stops. Because when distraction fades, questions rise. Am I living honestly? Is this path really mine? What am I avoiding? And those questions don't demand quick answers. They demand courage. Distraction numbs that discomfort. It's emotional anesthesia. It keeps us busy enough to avoid pain, but also too busy to access joy, clarity, and purpose. Imagine carrying a heavy backpack filled with unspoken feelings, disappointment, self-doubt, regret, and instead of putting it down and sorting through it, you keep adding distractions on top, hoping the weight will somehow disappear. It never does. It just gets heavier. That's why even after a day filled with stimulation, entertainment, and interaction, so many people still feel inexplicably empty at night. Because distraction doesn't resolve emotion, it postpones it. And postponed emotions don't vanish, they wait. They surface later as anxiety, burnout, irritability, or that quiet sense that life is passing you by while you're watching from the sidelines. Spiritually speaking, avoidance is resistance, and resistance creates suffering. Not because life is punishing you, but because your soul is asking for alignment and you keep changing the subject. I've met people who cannot sit alone for 5 minutes without reaching for something external, and they think the problem is boredom. But boredom is just the doorway. On the other side of it is awareness. And awareness is powerful. Awareness shows you what needs healing, what needs releasing, what needs choosing again. Distraction keeps that door locked. It convinces you that constant stimulation is normal, that numbness is peace, that staying busy is the same as being fulfilled. But listen closely. Anything that requires you to constantly escape yourself is not harmless. When you avoid discomfort long enough, you start avoiding growth. You avoid difficult conversations. You avoid disciplined effort. You avoid stillness. And slowly, without realizing it, you avoid becoming the person you're capable of being. This is why distraction feels addictive, not because it's pleasurable, but because it's relieving. It temporarily lifts the weight of self-examination. Yet relief is not the same as healing. Relief fades quickly, healing lasts. Think of it like this: distraction is like dimming the warning light on your dashboard instead of checking the engine. The noise ain't ops, but the damage continues underneath. And the longer you avoid it, the louder life eventually has to get your attention. Sometimes it shows up as failure, sometimes as heartbreak, sometimes as exhaustion so deep even distraction can't cover it anymore. But here's the grace in all of this, and please stay with me, because the lessons ahead go even deeper, and missing them would mean missing the real turning point. The moment you recognize distraction as emotional avoidance, you regain choice. You stop shaming yourself and start understanding yourself. You realize, I'm not weak, I'm protecting myself. And then you can gently ask, from what? That question alone can change everything, because once you see what you're avoiding, grief, fear, responsibility, desire, you can begin to meet it with compassion instead of escape. And when you stop running from yourself, something extraordinary happens. Your energy returns. The energy that was being spent on avoidance becomes available for creation. Focus sharpens not because you force it, but because you're no longer leaking it through emotional escape routes. This is where discipline stops feeling like punishment and starts feeling like self-respect. You're no longer distracting yourself from pain, you're learning to sit with it, understand it, and transform it. And transformation is never loud. It's quiet. It's subtle. It's choosing to stay present when your instinct is to flee. It's choosing to breathe instead of scroll, to listen instead of react, to feel instead of numb. And yes, it's uncomfortable at first. Growth always is. But discomfort is not danger. It's initiation. It's the soul saying, you're ready for more. If you've ever wondered why your dreams feel distant, even though you're constantly doing something, this might be the answer. You're busy avoiding instead of becoming. But the moment you stop running, the moment you allow stillness to teach you instead of threaten you, your life begins to reorganize around truth. And this is only the second step. The lessons ahead reveal how responsibility, focus, and purpose weave together to create a life that feels deeply aligned. Not rushed, not scattered, not numb, but awake. Stay until the final points. I promise you, what's coming next will challenge you, steady you, and ultimately return you to a version of yourself you may have forgotten. And missing that would be a regret far louder than any distraction you've been using to stay comfortable. There comes a moment in every life when the excuses quietly run out, when blaming the world, the timing, the noise, the system, or other people no longer brings relief. And that moment is uncomfortable because it hands you something heavier than frustration. It hands you responsibility. Your focus is your responsibility, and no one is coming to save it for you. Not your parents, not your partner, not your boss, not the universe. This is one of the most sobering truths of adulthood, and also one of the most liberating. Because the same world that distracts you is distracting everyone else too. Yet some people still build extraordinary lives, not because they are immune to noise, but because they decide, consciously, repeatedly, what deserves their attention and what does not. I want you to really sit with that. Attention is not something you find, it's something you claim. And see, claiming it means accepting that every time you say I didn't have time, what you often mean is I didn't choose it. That realization can sting, but it's also where power begins. I've watched people wait for the perfect environment to focus, the perfect silence, the perfect motivation, the perfect support, and they wait their whole lives. Focus is not a gift handed to you when conditions are ideal, it's a muscle you build in imperfect conditions. Think of a candle flame. In a protected room it burns easily, but in the wind it flickers, struggles, learns how to steady itself. Your focus is that flame. The world will blow at it constantly. That doesn't mean the flame is weak, it means you must learn how to shield it. Responsibility is the shield. And here's where many people misunderstand responsibility. They think it's harsh, rigid, punishing. But true responsibility is deeply compassionate. It says, I care about my life enough to protect it. When you stop outsourcing your focus to circumstances, you stop living reactively, you stop waking up asking, what does the world want from me today? And you start asking, what do I want to give my energy to today? That shift alone can change the trajectory of your life. Because without responsibility, discipline feels impossible. With responsibility, discipline feels inevitable. You begin to see that every notification you answer, every distraction you indulge, every commitment you make without intention is a vote for the kind of life you're building. And the truth most people avoid is this: no one is stealing your focus without your permission. They may invite it, tempt it, demand it, but only you can give it. This isn't OT about guilt, it's about clarity. The moment you accept that your attention is yours to manage, you stop feeling like a victim of your circumstances and start feeling like a participant in your destiny. And participation requires courage. It requires saying no to things that feel urgent but aren't important. It requires disappointing people occasionally. It requires letting go of the need to be constantly available, constantly responsive, constantly validated. Responsibility asks you to tolerate discomfort now, so you don't have to live with regret later. Think about the times you felt most proud of yourself. I promise you, they weren't the moments when life was easiest. They were the moments when you showed up anyway, when you focused despite fear, when you honored a commitment no one was watching. That's responsibility in action. And spiritually, this matters more than we realize. When you take responsibility for your focus, you're telling life, I'm awake. You're telling the universe, I'm ready to co-create, not just consume. Because focus is how intention becomes form. Without it, dreams remain ideas. With it, ideas become realities. I know this can feel overwhelming, especially if you're realizing how long you've been distracted, how much time feels lost. But listen to me carefully. Awareness does not come to shame you. It comes to free you. You don't need to punish yourself for yesterday. You need to choose yourself today. Responsibility is not about perfection, it's about consistency. It's about returning to what matters again and again, even after you drift. And you will drift. That's human. Responsibility is simply noticing and coming back over and over, like meditation, like prayer, like love. And here's something rarely said out loud. Taking responsibility for your focus will change your relationships. Some people will not like the version of you who is less available, less reactive, less distracted. But the right things, the right work, the right connections, the right opportunities will finally have space to enter. Because focus creates space. And space is where growth happens. If this truth is landing heavy in your chest, stay with me. The lessons ahead are even more powerful, and leaving now would mean missing the deeper connection between focus, identity, and purpose. What comes next will show you how responsibility transforms not just what you do, but who you become. Because when you stop waiting for someone else to rescue your attention, you realize something profound. You were never meant to be saved. You were meant to be sovereign. And sovereignty begins the moment you decide that your life is too important to be lived on autopilot. Stay until the end. You'll be grateful. You did what you focus on, you become. Not someday, not metaphorically, but quietly and relentlessly, moment by moment, the way water shapes stone without ever announcing its intention. This truth is simple, yet it governs entire lives. Your attention is not passive, it is creative. It is the brush with which you paint your inner world, and eventually your outer reality begins to resemble whatever that brush touches most often. Think about it honestly. If you spend your days feeding your mind fear, comparison, outrage, and doubt, your nervous system learns that this is the landscape it must survive in. Your body tightens, your heart closes, your choices shrink. But if you feed your mind purpose, curiosity, gratitude, and truth, even imperfectly, even in small doses, something inside you softens and expands. You begin to walk differently, you speak differently, you choose differently. This is not motivation. It is conditioning of the soul. We become fluent in whatever language we repeatedly listen to. If your inner dialogue is harsh, rushed, or cynical, that voice will eventually feel like you, even though it is only a habit of attention. And habits, once seen, can be changed. I've watched people convince themselves they are powerless, not because life defeated them, but because they rehearsed defeat in their minds every day. They focused on what was missing, what was unfair, what was impossible, and slowly, invisibly, they became someone who expected less from life and from themselves. On the other hand, I've met people whose circumstances were unimaginably difficult, yet they radiated steadiness and hope, not because they denied reality, but because they chose Aga, in and again, to place their attention on what they could shape rather than what they could not. That choice doesn't make life easy, it makes life meaningful. Focus is the soil in which identity grows. Whatever you plant there will eventually take root. This is why constant exposure to negativity is not harmless entertainment. It's training. Your mind learns what to look for. Your heart learns what to fear. Your spirit learns what to expect. And expectations quietly guide behavior. When you expect rejection, you hesitate. When you expect failure, you hold back. When you expect meaning, you show up fully. This is why spiritual traditions across cultures emphasize mindfulness, prayer, contemplation, not as rituals of escape, but as disciplines of attention. They understood something we are only beginning to remember. Awareness is power. To watch your thoughts without immediately believing them is freedom. To choose where your attention rests is sovereignty. And yet, in a world that profits from keeping you emotionally reactive, distracted, and divided, this kind of focus is revolutionary. It requires you to pause when the world says rush, to reflect when the world says react, to go inward when the world says look outside yourself for answers. But that inward turn is where transformation begins. Because once you see how your focus shapes your inner climate, you can begin to consciously curate it. You start asking different questions. What am I feeding my mind? What emotions am I rehearsing? What story am I telling myself about who I am and what is possible? And these questions matter more than we realize, because identity is not something you find, it's something you practice. Every day through attention, you practice being someone who believes, someone who doubts, someone who waits, someone who acts, someone who numbs, someone who awakens. And practice becomes character, character becomes destiny. This is why even a small shift in focus can feel destabilizing at first. When you stop feeding old patterns, they protest. When you stop indulging familiar negativity, it can feel like loss. But what you're actually experiencing is withdrawal from an identity that no longer serves you. Growth always involves grieving the comfort of what was familiar. Yet on the other side of that discomfort is clarity. And clarity brings energy. Energy brings courage. Courage brings action. This is the quiet chain reaction of conscious focus. You don't wake up one day transformed. You wake up one day realizing you've been choosing differently for a while now, and life has responded. If this reflection is stirring something inside you, a recognition, a discomfort, a sense of responsibility, don't turn away, stay with it. Because the lessons ahead go even deeper into how focus connects to purpose and stillness, and missing them would mean missing the moment where understanding turns into embodiment. This is where many people stop, at insight, but insight without integration fades. What comes next shows you how to live this truth, not just admire it. Remember, where your attention rests today is shaping who you will be tomorrow. And that makes this moment far more powerful than it seems. Stay until the end. The final points hold the wisdom that turns awareness into a life lived with intention. And walking away now would mean leaving the most transformative part untouched,